It is 1 o'clock. Would like to convene as the Brookings County Board of Equalization. We have discussion and possible action on Park Place Incorporated appeal. I guess I'll turn it over to you
Thank
guys.
you.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, certainly. Jared Gass. I'm an attorney here in town. I do a lot of work for Park Place in Lance Park. We're here to appeal the taxing decision on the hotel, the Brookings Convention Center, and Water Park. The assessment came down at just over 5.4 million. Today we're asking for an assessed value of 3.6 million. And I've got a few comments with how we came up to that number. Of course, the hotel and convention center here in town with the water park is unique not only to Brookings, but to the region, really. It's hard to find comparables locally to the hotel and convention center and water park. So doing some research, I'm just trying to find some recent comparable sales in the hospitality arena. That also is challenging, particularly because of the effect that the COVID-19 pandemic had on hospitality. It had a significant impact on the market for these types of buildings. When I went through the best comparison that I could find in terms of a recent sale or a recent contract was a Dakota Lodge down in Sioux Falls. And if you're familiar with the Russell Street interchange, Dakota Lodge, if you take Russell, it's just off to the north, next to, I forget the name of the camper supply place there. Shaps Campers. I do have 5 copies. If you want to see what I'm talking about, I can distribute those as we go through this. Yeah, so this is the Dakota Lodge. According to the NAI website, it's under contract. I'm not privy to the terms of the contract. I don't know if it's under contract for 3.3 million. My assumption is that it's not under contract for anything more than that, because I do know that this property has been marketed for some time for sale. This is a 98-room hotel. The hotel here in town, Brookings Inn and Convention Center, is 120 rooms. The most interesting part about this Dakota Lodge property is that it also has a water park, just much like the property here in Brookings does. It's smaller in the square footages in that sense because of the convention center aspect here to the hotel in town, but through the region, this is the most comparable recent marketed property that I could find, and like I said, it's under contract according to the NAI website for 3.3 million. And that, on a per key basis, puts that Dakota Lodge property at $33,673 per key. Of course, the Sioux Falls market is a better market for hospitality. More people, more traffic, more events, more chances to sell hotel rooms and use the hotel. For comparison, I bumped the price down to the Brookings property at $30,000 per key, which I think is reasonable, and I'll address some other comparables as well. But at $30,000 a key, with 120 rooms for the property here in Brookings, that gives a value of 3.6 million. And keep in mind, the property in Sioux Falls, this is the marketed price. This is not the assessed price. So he's under contract at somewhere 3.3 million or less in terms of a fair market sale, not an assessed appraisal. So we certainly believe the $30,000 per key rate for the property in Brookings is a fair assessment. Looking at some other comparable sales, and I don't have prints out for these, just some bare numbers. The Blackstone Lodge out in Lee Deadwood according to the broker's website, is under contract for 1.9 million. That's a 70-room lodge. That puts a per key price at $27,142. I mentioned the Dakota Lodge, which you have a copy of. That's $33,673 per room. Branching out, just looking at recent sales in the region, the Motel 6, again, not real comparable to this property here in Brookings, but just in terms of hospitality sales in York, Nebraska, 1.4 million. That's a 60-key hotel. That's $23,000 per key. A little bit bigger market in Lincoln, Nebraska. There's a Quality Inn down there built in 1999, recently sold for $2.5 million with 70 keys. That's $35,714 per key. I mentioned earlier the COVID pandemic had a significant impact on Mr. Park's business out there. Prior to COVID, he did have it sold on a contract for deed. The property that at that time was listed with Dale Zomer, the same broker selling the Dakota Lodge. He had it listed with Mr. Zomer, and it was under contract on a contract for deed for $4.8 million. And that's still $600,000 less than the appraisal, than the assessed value that came back this year. That included all the equipment and everything. That was a wholesale deal, hotel, water park, everything for $4.8 million. Again, that was pre-COVID. There's no way that Mr. Park would get that amount today, particularly based on the COVID pandemic. I think business has steadily began to get better, but just in terms of sale value, the pandemic had a significant effect. And like I said, the best comparison is that Dakota Lodge down in Sioux Falls with the water park and everything like that under contract for somewhere south of $3.3 million. So we believe 3.6 for an assessed value is reasonable. That's $30,000 per key, and we'd be asking for 3.6 million on the assessment. Any questions of me or Mr. Park?
Questions? I have no questions. Reed, go ahead.
All right, so here we got the subject property at 2500 6th Street South. Structure value of $4,048,800. Land value of $1,363,700. For total value of $5,412,500. Number
on,
of
Reed.
rooms.
Just a second.
It's table 3, right?
It was.
Plugged one of two cords.
Sorry for the operator error. Good to go.
Number of rooms is 120 for an assessed value per room of $45,104. Comp 1, we got 3034 LaFerre Drive in Brookings here. Sale date of 4/15/2019. Sale price of $3,475,000. Number of rooms 65, giving it a sale price per room of $53,461. Comp 2, we got at 3020 LaFerre Drive in Brookings here. Sale date 1/30/2015 for a sale price of $4,431,000. Number of rooms is 62 for a sale price per room of $71,467. Next, Comp 3, we got 3000 LaFerre Drive here in Brookings. Sale date 7/23/2018. Sale price of $3,450,000. Number of rooms 76 for a sale price per room of $45,394. And in 2014, we had a building value of $2,716,500. There was a building permit taken out on July 23rd of 2014 to do a water park remodel in the amount of $3 million, giving us a total value of $5,716,500 just on the building.
questions of the board?
Can we look at the assessment history on the property as well then, Reed? I guess Jacob's driving that.
You're only going to see 2 years of history on this parcel because it was a bigger chunk of land that was intact. And then in 2019, there was a replatting done that split that land into a couple different pieces. So you lose the history here on Beacon of that. Reed, you may have that on the paper card.
So in 2016, we had let's see here. We had a total assessed value of $4,614,160. Granted, this was on discretionary formula at that point due to the water park. And then in 2017, we were at $4,754,620. That was then at 40% on discretionary formula. 2018, we were at 60% for $4,895,080. 2019, we were at 80% on discretionary for a value of $5,035,540. And then in 2020, when we were at off discretionary, we were at $5,349,500. And at 2021, we were at $5,412,500.
Question to Mr. Gass and Mr. Park. The Dakota Lodge that you referenced, does that have convention space available within it as well?
Does Dakota Lodge have convention space, do you know?
I don't believe it does.
I don't think it does, certainly not just based on the pictures and things like that, it doesn't, doesn't market itself as a convention center. Certainly, the building out here has a lot more square footage than the lodge does.
And as such, another potential revenue stream besides just the cost per key
Sure.
that goes along with that.
Yep.
Does the Dakota Lodge have a restaurant?
I don't think so,
No.
no.
So the nature of a full service hotel plus water park, convention, and restaurant spaces is by its nature going to be a little bit different than the Dakota Lodge and bring additional value. Certainly brings additional costs with it as well. But I think there is a pretty fundamental difference in some of those things in terms of how those function on a full service basis.
Yeah, I think you're right in a sense that there are more revenue streams for the convention center here in town. But again, just as occupancy at the hotel was affected, of the convention center as well as the restaurant. The lease that Mr. Park has with the restaurant has COVID provisions in it, for example.
Did you say it was listed for sale on a contract for deed, or it was sold on a contract for deed?
It was marketed with NAI down in Sioux Falls. They brought a buyer in. The parties agreed to a contract for deed price of $4.8 million. That never did proceed to final closing. Ultimately, Mr. Park got the property back through a rescission of the contract for deed. So it did not close, but it was under contract for $4.8.
And what was the date on that?
August 15th of 19. Yep, contract for deed.
I have a question for Reed, if I might. If we could go back to the slide that showed the figures, this one right here.
Okay.
If they took out a building permit for $3 million for the water park remodel, and that was 7 years ago, do we stay with the $3 million, or 7 years there would have been some substantial depreciation? Do we look at that at all, or how do we figure that depreciation in on that?
You're not going to have much depreciation in a 7-year period, but you are going to have an appreciation on material costs in 7 years. I would say in 7 years, you're not going to see a whole, you may see 2%, I would say, on the depreciation.
We actually have the water park split out on a separate property card in there. for a real assessed value on just the water park itself.
And yes, we do currently have no depreciation on that part.
Any other input from the board?
We go back to the slide that's got the assessed value and all those different numbers that we started out with at the beginning. There, thank you.
So I guess if I may, I'm a little bit confused about the request for 3.6 when what I'm seeing in front of me is not 3.6.
Yeah, me and Mr. Park talked about that. When I came, I think it was before the city, I believe, and I think Mr. Park made his initial request. And just based on the comps that I came up with, the 3.6 was my advice to Lance on what I think the assessed value is based on my research and the comparable sales. So that's where the discrepancy is. Initially, Lance came in at 4.8, and he just pulled that number from the contract for deed price. That again was a pre-COVID price. I mean, that was before the pandemic hit. He got a contract for deed, not an outright sale. Keep in mind, this was a contract for deed that did not close at 4.8 million.
That sale had to have closed because it was filed at the Register of Deeds on a book and page.
The contract was filed,
Okay,
yep, but the payments on the back end did not finalize.
Sure.
So in order to get it back into Mr. Park's name, they just did a rescission of the contract, and he signed, and the buyer signed a quitclaim deed, and they washed their hands of it. But it was under contract,
sure.
certainly, but the payments didn't, the buyer didn't complete the payments.
And for the board, the 4.8 that's listed up here on the screen was the amount that was requested on the appeal form PT 17 required by law.
The 4.8 on the contract, was that an arm's length transaction?
It was, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, the broker down in Sioux Falls, Mr. Zolmer, brought the buyer. He represented the buyer. So yes, it was.
Reed, can we flip back through the comps that you guys used one more time? Sorry, Jacob. Who's running the technology?
So there's the subject. None of our sales transactions that we're using for comps admittedly are during COVID distressed hospitality times. We don't have any sales in Brookings of hospitality businesses during COVID, so.
And so all three of our subject properties as comps have some version of water park associated with them.
They have water, they have pools and hot tubs in them mostly, but none
Okay,
with
not
the
an
water
actual
park
water
to
park.
scale of, yes, correct,
They do have pool.
yes.
But all three of these in the Brookings market with sales in the last 6 to 7 years approximately. And the assessed value per key is in excess of $45,000 a key. Granted, pre-COVID, I understand that
Yeah, and I can't
completely.
overstate that enough. I mean, really, if you go out and look and research the effect that this has had on the hospitality industry across the nation, prices are plummeting. And they still are.
I'm well aware.
Okay.
I think one of the challenges is understanding that the way that Brookings has rebounded post-COVID is actually superior to Sioux Falls when you look at the STAR reports for both markets. And so because of Brookings' smaller convention and tourism base, it tends to be that we attract smaller events, not larger events, and they're spread out over fewer hotels. So we actually recover faster than Sioux Falls does. That's sort of the reality of the STAR reports as we've seen them pre-COVID and post-COVID. I literally pulled STAR reports in the last 6 months and pre-COVID. So I understand the way this is looking based on Brookings to Sioux Falls. I don't know that discounting it to the point of $30,000 a key makes sense. I still think that somewhere in that neighborhood of 45,000 a key is reasonable, understanding that we are on our way back out of a pandemic, not headed further into a pandemic, and that ultimately the price for land and property is not necessarily strictly based on the conditions of what's going on in the world. Certainly the land and property, if it were to be adaptively reused in some other way, could turn into something else and still has value. I disagree fundamentally with the idea of 3.6. Could I be convinced of 4.8 because of the arm's length transaction? Potentially.
Well, yeah, and I would argue that 4.8 is an absolute absolute peak. I mean, because like I said, it was marketed for sale, and he had no buyers at that time, pre-COVID, for a building that was built in 1973. So I would hope 4.8 would be a peak, and they would consider something less. With regard to that $3 million on the water park, he's, well, just explain to them what you have for equipment and the cost and things like
Right.
that.
The pool pack unit, the unit that heats and cools it, that piece of equipment was $500,000. Plus, along with that, because of the additional equipment that was in there, we've got the water slides, we've got so on and so forth. Those are all equipment which would depreciate faster than the building portion would. We also had to add extra heaters, extra filters, extra so on and so forth. So all of those pieces would depreciate faster than the building structure itself. So I just want to keep that in mind also. On the fact that it is a 50-year-old hotel. So, 80% of the building, 85% of the building has old wiring, old plumbing, old, so on and so forth. So a lot of what we did was cosmetic, we redid the fascia on the outside to make it look better on the outside. A lot of that, part of that also was we had to replace the roof. The roof was probably, well, I know the hotel portion of it was 30, 40 years old. So part of that money went to replacing the roof of the hotel also.
I think part of the conversation certainly bears consideration is the depreciation of the water park components, because equipment does depreciate faster than buildings. And I think the fact that we haven't considered the depreciation of that part of it makes a lot of sense to have that conversation, because I don't know exactly what that depreciation looks like and how much of that building related $3 million was equipment related. That's hard to sit here and say.
One thing to think about too is that our office does not value any equipment on the assessment. Anything that does a job is considered personal property and it's not on the assessment. And Reed, can you tell us what the total value on the water park property record is? It's not $3 million.
Just on the water park you're
Yes.
asking? Just on the water park portion, we're at 630,100.
So if you go back to that chart that's got our banner across, the number that's there, only 600 of the 4,048,000, only 600,000 of that's assigned to the water park.
Yes, ma'am.
Got it.
Do we have any assessed value for the convention facility separately or the restaurant separately?
No, the only thing that we have broke out is the water park itself. The rest of the hotel is all in as one.
The reason it's separated is so it was easier for our office to pluck that value of that water park new construction out and apply the discretionary formula reductions on just that value. If you combine it with the hotel, it's kind of like the attached garage we talked about last week, where if you build a garage today, attach it to a house that was built in 1950, the garage is going to take on considerations of the house. It's going to be now a 1950 garage, be depreciated substantially. So the reason that we did the discretionary formula by separating it out was to give him the maximum benefit on the tax reduction on that 4-year cycle, if that makes sense. Now, once the discretionary formula has run its course, which it has, the common thing to do would be to take that extra property record, combine it back in with the hotel, and it would all be one value. Now, if you get into the program and dig into the background, you can differentiate the square foot rates of each individual use. You probably have a convention center use, a water park use, hotel, motel use, and restaurant, all four with differentiating square foot rates, but on the printouts, it's got a total value for structures and a total value for land.
And when I look at this slide, it appears there's no disagreement on the land value, but haven't there been some land sales right near there recently? And when you're looking at almost 4 acres of land sitting right where that is, if the building wasn't there, I'm not saying the building shouldn't be there, but based on recent land sales in that area, what would that 4 acres be worth?
Off the top of my head, I'm not certain on
There's
locations.
the Harms Oil one right over next to where the car wash is now. I believe that was 1.5 million.
And how big of a piece
Right
of
there.
land?
One.
That was just under 2 acres. Sale price on that land was 1.59 million.
Does that 1.3 on the land, because of the replat, is that just for the hotel, or did that include some of the other land that was part of it prior to the replat?
Nope, it's mostly for what's underneath the hotel and a little bit of parking that surrounds it. It's 4.28 acres. There's a completely separate parcel for the land that is abutting the interstate to the east. The outline here is the 4.32 acres of the hotel land value at 1.363. That's in line with other commercial properties within that neighborhood, and a neighborhood is just a comparison market for our assessments, but it's, what's the square foot rate on that, Reed? Right off the card.
Base rate is 7.32 per square foot.
Okay.
But if I'm hearing Commissioner Pierce correctly, a 2-acre parcel just sold for 1.5 million 2 years ago?
Something like that. And I think another one that was just around the corner, and I can't think of the name of the road there, it might be that piece there. What did that just sell for?
That was the O'Reilly's Auto Parts building site. That land sold for $475,000. It doesn't have the frontage, but it's just over an acre.
Okay, so I was thinking about 500,000 per half acre. When you look at 4 acres, that impacts. I'm gonna just say where I'm at. I look at this and I think perhaps the building might be somewhat overvalued, because all of our comparables that we're looking at, those are much newer buildings, and I've been in most of them, and I've been in the facility that we're talking about and have a feel for the difference in the rooms. I think the land might be undervalued, but we're not really fighting over that right now. But what is, for me, a serious argument is the fact that it was sold on a contract for deed in 2019 for the 4.8 million, and all of those factors would have been taken into consideration. And I think I heard Commissioner Boersma say she could maybe be convinced on the 4.8 million. I could too. I don't think I would be convinced on a lower amount, and I do understand the COVID argument. I have a question though. I did the math. To figure the per key, you take the total amount and divide it by the number of rooms. Is it at 4.8, is it $40,000 per key?
Yes.
Did I do that right?
Yep.
And I do think depreciation is an issue when you've got the internal things that we talked about on the water park, but having that down to the 600,000 maybe takes care of that issue for me.
You're correct, and your $40,000 figure at the 120 rooms would be 4.8 million.
Those rooms are a lot older than the rooms on our comparables, but they didn't have restaurants and convention centers either.
I entertain a motion.
Could we have that banner back up there again? So would the appropriate motion be to approve the appellant's request of 4.8 million? Or do you want it broken down by land and by structure?
I think the appropriate request would be if you make a motion for the 4.8 to use those numbers up there on the slide, leave the land value alone and adjust the structure value accordingly.
I'd make a motion that the property be valued, the structures at $3,436,300 and the land at $1,363,700 for a total of 4.8 million.
I'd second.
We have a motion and a second.
Just a quick
Comments?
question. Local board action was the city council? Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And do you have any idea what their vote was?
They're a unanimous vote to no change to the assessor's value, and the reason being is because there was a request at 4.8, and then Mr. Park was not here at that time, and then the request by the attorney was the 3.3. The discussion was they weren't sure what they were asking for, so the safest thing to do at that point was to no change it and let it come to your guys' board.
Okay. Does this have to go back to their board if we make a change?
It does not. If either party, the DOE's office or the appellant, is not accepting with the 4.8 change that you're requesting now, the next step is to go out to OHE or to circuit court.
All right, thank you. Just need to know that process.
No other questions? Call the roll, please.
Bartley,
Aye.
Boersma,
Aye.
Pierce,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item B, action to approve a correction to the Verhook Investments LLC parcel number 40180-00900-002-00. We have a motion to approve.
You want a little background first?
Well, a little background, sorry.
So the parcel that you see highlighted up on your screen here is the parcel that we're entertaining a correction for. And the reason being is the parcel down below, adjoining it to the south, those two parcels were one 3 years ago. And the owner of the parcel to the south split into two pieces, sold the north portion. The assessor's office placed the garages incorrectly on the wrong parcel, and they've been assessed there from the time of the split. And the owner of the parcel to the north came in and was questioning why he had a picture on Beacon of some garages on his land when there aren't garages there. And all it took for me was mapping it to say, oh, well, that's a mistake by our office. We'll gladly correct that, and we'll do it next week. So what we're trying to do is take the garage value away from his assessment for the 21 assessment, so there will not be a tax bill issued in 22 to be abated. What we're doing in the background that you're not seeing here is abating the taxes that have already been paid on this building for 2019, 2020, and what's due currently in 2021. That abatement will come to the regular county commission meeting here within a month.
I move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. No further comments? Call the roll.
Boersma,
Aye.
Pierce,
Aye.
Bartley,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
motion carries.
And that concludes, and I don't know if we need we have a motion to adjourn as the Brookings County Board of Equalization.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. We are adjourned.
I just wonder if Jacob needs to make any introductions.
I certainly will. My name is Jacob, and I'm the Director of Equalization. over there,
Did you want to get paid again?
presenting our case for the hotel property is Reed. He's the Deputy Director of Equalization. And then we have two appraisers sitting over here. Rusty on the right, he's Rusty Brandsrud. He's been with us for a couple years now. I must be lacking in introductions. And on the left, we have our second newest appraiser, Anita Harrison. She's been with our office. She replaced Larry. She's been here since January. And we have another appraiser that started yesterday in our office. His name is Ken Gable. You remember our discussion. He arrived here from Alaska and started yesterday. He took Jerry's position that was vacated. So we're fully staffed.
Welcome.
Thank you.